Hello and welcome to another episode of Autism Family Life, bringing you all things autism, family, and life in 30 minutes or less. In this week's episode, we are going to continue on, kind of tacking on to last week's conversation, which was about 16 very triggering things that this parent of an autistic child is really sick of hearing. So in this episode, we're going to bust 10 commonly believed myths about autism that people still tend to believe. If you are watching on YouTube, then yes, you should know that I do batch record my podcast episodes. So if it still looks like I'm wearing the exact same thing that I was wearing last week, or if my hair doesn't look like it's different, it's because I batch record. So, before we move into the episode, though, I would like to remind you to please leave a review and to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform it is that you might be listening in. If that's Apple Podcasts, if that's Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Google Play. And if you are watching on the YouTube channel, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can get your updates. Now, last week, I went into 16 things that I as a parent of an autistic child, have gotten pretty sick of hearing. And there were a couple of moments where I got pretty ranty in there, and I'm going to eventually, expand on those things for sake of future podcast episodes. In this episode, though, I wanted to kind of go back to one of those other things, which was, I believe it was the he or she doesn't look autistic. And the reason I touch on that one is because it was one of those things that I had to get over as a parent of an autistic child. Because before I had my daughter, my conceived notions of what an autistic individual was supposed to look like and how they were supposed to act was based purely on things that I had seen in movies, in Rain Man in particular, which starred Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. So my preconceived notion and my preconceived picture of autism was that all autistic people were autistic savants. And so until I had, experience with this to have my daughter, I really didn't know what to expect. And I had, like I said, a lot of my own preconceived notions that I brought to the table that I had to work on. And so this podcast episode is all about those kind of like the 10 pretty commonly believed myths about autism spectrum disorder. So the first myth is that all individuals with autism are the same. And this one is absolutely false because, as just the name implies, it's a spectrum disorder. So you have this full range of what autism looks like and how it manifests in individuals, plus the additional challenge of like a comorbid disorder like ADHD or epilepsy or OCD. So there's just a lot going on there. There's a lot of different pieces going on. And it kind of ties into that almost cliched saying, you've met one person on the spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum. And that is generally true because I have several friends who have daughters on the autism spectrum, and their daughters are very different from my daughter. So myth number one, which was that all individuals with autism are the same. Myth number two is that individuals with autism aren't affectionate or they aren't capable of showing affection. And this one, I can tell you, is absolute BS. Speaking from personal experience, my daughter is very, very affectionate with people that she knows. And she's always pretty much been that way. She loves hugs and she loves squeezes and she loves being close with people. She gives kisses. She likes getting kisses. So this one, again, though, it does depend on the individual. But for my daughter, completely false. Myth number 3 ties into a couple of those things that I started ranting about last week, and that's that you can either outgrow autism or that you can cure autism. And that is absolute crap, especially the cure stuff. Do not get me started on this cure talk. Again, this was one of those episodes that I'm going to save for a future podcast episode, because when I get going on cure and autism, I don't think there's anything that quite triggers me more when people are implying or referencing that there's a cure. But the outgrowing the autism, this also depends on the individual. Sometimes the hormones, when they go through puberty, it really does a number on autistic kids. So it might change how the autism is presenting. And with all the recent studies, for the neurological stuff, with neuroplasticity, you do have potential to, kind of lessen behaviors or keep them from happening, but the autism is still there. It's not going to just magically disappear. Myth number 4 is that bad parenting causes autism. And this goes back to, I believe it was like the 1950s or the 1960s, when they talked about the refrigerator mom concept. And that was that moms who are cold or who do not show affection to their kids were the cause of their child's autism. And if someone were to ever say this to me or to reference this to me, that it was my parenting or lack of parenting that caused my child's autism, please, any of my friends and family, be prepared to come bail me out of jail, because just don't imply that kind of crap to me. Number 5 is that individuals with autism are just misbehaving, and people might tend to think this when they see an autistic individual in the throes of having a sensory meltdown, and, mom in that situation is probably just as frustrated. Well, not just as frustrated, but mom in that situation is also frustrated, and it's all that we can do as a parent to try to get ourselves under control so that we can then try to help our child. But in that situation, when, people are looking at your child having this extreme meltdown, stop judging. Because really, you never know what's going to set a child off, and you never know what is going on, and you never know what the mom has gone through or dad has gone through in that particular time, and you don't know what they've already tried. So don't just assume that the child is having a misbehavior issue, because oftentimes it's not a misbehavior issue, it's a sensory overload issue. And at the same hand, sometimes it is a behavioral issue. Myth number 6 is that individuals with autism will never amount to anything. And again, this probably goes back to the times like the 50s and 60s when autism really still was not understood. And many individuals with autism would either end up in a group home or in a mental institution. Now, if you had said to the parents of, say, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, or to Albert Einstein, or to Dan Aykroyd, or to Suzanne Boyle, or to Daryl Hannah, or to the parents of Dr. Temple Grandin, that their children weren't going to amount to anything because they're on the autism spectrum, I really would have loved to have known what their reply would have been, because those are all individuals who are either suspected to be on the autism spectrum or who have come out and said that they are on the autism spectrum. Dr. Temple Grandin, for example, is a very well-known author. She's a professor, and she's on the autism spectrum. So please do not tell me that individuals with autism will never amount to anything, because those are some individuals who have very, very solidly proven that yes, they can. Myth number 7 is that individuals with autism look normal, and the reason I can't stand this one is because there is no normal. People aren't. What is normal? Normal is relative. Normal is a setting on your dryer. Normal does not apply to people. We are all individuals. So how is it an individualistic thing if we're looking normal? What does normal look like? my normal probably doesn't look like your normal. So this is a situational thing, and it also applies to individuals on the autism spectrum. Myth number 8 is that individuals with autism cannot live a normal life. And this one is, I believe, a matter of opinion. And a lot of this fully depends on the individual's abilities to function independently and to navigate their environment independently. But if they are living a fulfilled life, even if that is with support or, not completely independent, then how do you define what a normal life is? So this one, again, it's a matter of opinion, and I think it really does depend on the individual. Myth number 9 was one of those ones that I had to personally overcome, and that was that all individuals with autism are savants. And this is just not true. Some individuals, yes, are savants, but not all individuals are savants. And to that same extent, not all individuals who are savants are necessarily on the autism spectrum. They have to be presenting some other things as well. And myth number 10 is that individuals with autism don't have feelings, which individuals with autism, autistic individuals, they are so capable of expressive emotion, expressive feelings, and by showing these things, just because they might not always be able to articulate them in a way that we would come to expect or that we would hope for them to be, does not mean that they are incapable of showing feelings or that they are incapable of having feelings. Most of the time, more often than not, it's just a matter of giving them the tools that they need to fully express their feelings and to properly express their feelings. For some kids on the spectrum, the way that they regulate their emotions is completely different than how we do it because they don't have the ability to do it. So the individuals with autism not having feelings and being robotic is just a load of crap. So those were the 10 myths commonly believed about autism. Some more prevalent than others. So to recap, and if you go to the show notes for this particular episode, they are also listed out there. So myth number 1 is that all individuals with autism are the same. Myth number 2 is that individuals with autism aren't affectionate. Myth number 3 is that you can outgrow or cure autism. Myth number 4 is that bad parenting causes autism. Myth number 5 is that individuals with autism are just misbehaving. Myth number 6 is that individuals with autism will never amount to anything. Myth number 7 is that individuals with autism look normal. Myth number 8 is that individuals with autism cannot live a normal life. Myth number 10 is that individuals with autism are savants. And myth number 10 is that individuals with autism don't have feelings. And in case you are keeping track or just want to know for posterity's sake whether or not these myths are true or false, all 10 of the myths that were covered on today's episode are absolutely false. If you have any that you would like to add to this list, please leave them in a comment on the show notes or on the YouTube video. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on whatever network it is that you are listening. And I will see you all next week with another episode of Autism Family Life. Have a great day.